we have a good broadcast. I don't know if we will, but we're going to try. All right, that looks good. Now I'm going to go to YouTube. I'm going to do a search for Theology Central. We're live. I'm going to go to there. All right, that looks good. Now I'm going to go to YouTube. Okay, we've gotten that fixed. Wow. It's okay. We're going to get started here. I'm going to wait for the... Wow, that's crazy. Okay. Our discussion about Sally when the wine runs out, that song, over 200 views on YouTube. I haven't looked at the analytics on YouTube, but that may not mean anything. In fact, there's a high probability it doesn't mean much of anything. But I thought that was interesting that on YouTube, Sally, when the wine runs out, when we did the lyric review and discussion about the song, for that to have over 200 views on YouTube, that's pretty significant. But most likely what happened is someone was looking for the song, Sally, when the wine runs out, saw the title, clicked on it, immediately realized it was not the music, it was not the video, it was not anything, and they stopped listening. So, those numbers probably don't mean much, if anything, on YouTube, but yeah, I just noticed that. So who knows? Maybe one person would listen to it and like, oh, he's going to analyze the song and the lyrics. I think my breakdown of the song was pretty accurate. I think it was pretty accurate. So we will see. West Virginia just tuned in. Have we ever had a listener from West Virginia? I don't know if we've ever had a listener from West Virginia. I don't think so. I would have to look. I mean, probably. Probably at least we've had some, but yeah, I don't know. But West Virginia, that doesn't usually show up on the map. Now, of course, for downloads and streams, obviously we've had listeners from West Virginia because we've had listeners from every state and almost every country on the map. But for a live broadcast, that audience is always very, very limited because why is that true, class? Because I refuse to just do the live broadcast at scheduled times, post that schedule, and live by that schedule. Because if I did that, I would have a greater chance of slowly building a live audience. That's what you're taught to do in broadcasting. Have a scheduled time. Promote that scheduled time. Live and die by that scheduled time. But I refuse to do that. Because I guarantee you, if you have a scheduled time, you've got two options, right? You either turn on that microphone at that scheduled time and you are honest with people. When you don't feel like being there, when you're not in the mood, you don't want to talk about anything, you just turn on the microphone and be very raw and real, okay? And that means people probably may not get what they want. They may not even like listening to you whine for an hour. Or you turn on the microphone and you're like, welcome everybody. And you pretend and you put on a performance. And I am trash at doing that. So I tend to just turn on the microphone whenever I want, however I'm feeling. And that's what you get. Okay. So I don't know. I like the freedom and not being bound by a schedule approach. And some people say, well, what time? I get that question. So what time do you do your live broadcast? Whenever I feel like it. Okay. So, all right. Thank you, everyone who has tuned in. Let's do this. I think this should be interesting. I think what I'm going to say, everyone's probably pretty familiar with. I think everyone should be familiar with this. From a hermeneutical standpoint and from a theological standpoint. If you're not, I've been aware of it for, I don't know, it feels like a good portion of my Christian life, but I don't know if I truly have ever embraced it. And so that we'll talk about, that whole idea of knowing Knowing is one thing, doing is something totally different. All right, are you ready? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, lions, tigers, bears, oh my, we go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, June the 20th, 2025. It is currently 10:45 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. Well, it's time once again to open up the historic lectionary and look at the lectionary readings for today. Now, I've been challenging everyone to do that for this entire summer, right? From Memorial Day weekend all the way through Labor Day, I've been challenging everyone, open up the historic lectionary. I mean, we haven't gotten to Labor Day yet, but from Memorial Day weekend all the way through Labor Day, that entire period of time is dedicated to what we're calling the Summer Lectionary Challenge. It's open up the historic lectionary. Let's step into the rhythm and the flow of the early church. Let's see what the lectionary readings are, what they have for us, what they're going to challenge us about. And I've not turned on the microphone every single day and talked about the readings every single day, but I've told you where to find the readings. I've told you to look them up. Sometimes I send them out as a notification via the Church One app. I need to do that on a more consistent basis. But the bottom line is the lectionary readings are easily available online, and I've challenged everyone to read them and consider them, and hopefully just while everything else is going on in the culture and in your life and in my life, we have this constant, right? The lectionary readings are there every single day, every single year. They've been there for a very, very, very long time. And we just open it up and go, okay, here's what I'm confronted with today. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to go look for anything. It's right there. And that is what we have been doing. Now, it led to a lengthy discussion about divorce and remarriage, because we found ourselves in Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. It led us to a very important discussion about lust. And so those were controversial, very important discussions. And I hope that you found them to be beneficial. But today, I think we come to something very interesting. I don't think this should be very controversial, but I'm hoping it's very interesting. And I don't know if you've ever heard this. I don't know if you've ever been taught this, but have you ever been taught about the fool's speech? The fool's speech. It's a section of scripture where the Apostle Paul basically says, I'm a fool, and then gives a speech as him being the fool. He takes on the role of a fool and gives the speech of being a fool. Are you familiar with that kind of idea, that concept? You probably have heard it to some level, to some degree. I don't know if they called it the fool's speech. The first time I think I encountered this idea was a long time ago. I don't even know which school I was in at the time. And I don't know. I didn't really grasp maybe the theological significance, the practical significance. I was like, oh, this is what we call this. This is how we classify it. Okay, I can remember this for preaching. Okay, it was more like, oh, I can sound really smart by remembering this. I don't think I took it into consideration at all. And I know this much. It did not obviously impact my life moving forward. After all of these years of knowing about the fool's speech, I can't tell you that it's had much impact on my life. In fact, I think I've lived opposite to the fool's speech. Maybe you haven't, but I have. And I think that just demonstrates it's very easy for us to open the Bible, read it, and to learn it and to know it We're constantly confronted with the fact that we never actually do it. And in reality, we never can, because the Bible puts forth God's law, which demands absolute perfection internally and externally, and what we do and what we don't do, and we will never obey it. So we're in a perpetual state of disobedience. It doesn't matter, Christian or non-Christian, you're in a perpetual state of disobedience. And that drives us to the foot of the cross, and then Christ's obedience to that very law is then imputed to my account, accredited to my account by faith alone, apart from works. So I'm not surprised that it hasn't impacted me more, but I hope maybe today it will impact all of us differently than it has in a very long time. Now, what is the full speech? Obviously, it's about the Apostle Paul. So that should give you some idea where it could possibly be found, right? That limits where it can be found. I know that can mark off Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, John. Okay, we can just mark off the entire Old Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We can put that away. Or the book of Revelation okay. All right, so you're now limited to a smaller section of Scripture. Still a large portion of Scripture, but a smaller section. So if you don't know, the full speech occurs in 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians, which is perfect because today's lectionary reading, in fact, the lectionary has been in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. It's been in 2 Corinthians for a few days, maybe this entire week. I would have to go back and look. We got sidetracked by the reading in Matthew. But I think it's been in 2 Corinthians most of this entire week. But today brings us to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 18 is where we're supposed to begin. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 18. Now, I feel like I have to go back to 16 because that's where it really begins. But I can't. I'm going to just stay. I'm going to keep myself restricted to the lectionary and this initial reading, and then we will expand this to cover the entire speech, the entire full speech. And I would really challenge you to take some very good notes about the full speech, because you're going to be asked at the end of this episode to write your own full speech. All right? And then I want you to post that full speech on the refrigerator. I want you to stand up in Sunday school and recite your full speech. I want you to stand on top of the pew in church and recite your full. Okay, you probably can't do that, but I want you to embrace your own full speech. I know what you're saying. Are you saying I'm a fool? How dare you? Okay, well, you just wait and see how this all plays out. So here's Paul's full speech, 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Let's start in verse 18. Seeing that many boast according to the flesh, I also will boast. Now, this kind of sets this contrast up. There are many who boast, but they boast according to the flesh. Paul's like, okay, people boast. They boast according to the flesh. Well, I'm going to boast. And then now he's speaking to those in the Corinthian church. He's in the church of Corinth. He says, listen, for you, now the you is the believers, the people at the church of Corinth. For you put up with fools gladly. You guys put up with fools gladly. You're more than happy to put up with fools, since you yourselves are wise. And I think that's very sarcastic. You guys put up with fools because you are so wise. I think there's a little bit of sarcasm here. For you put up with it if one brings you into bondage. You're putting up with fools even if you're brought into bondage. If one devours you, if they actually take from you, rob you, devour you, you still put up with it. If one takes from you, if one exalts himself, if one strikes you in the face, to our shame, I say that we were too weak for that. Hey, you guys could put up with all of that. We were too weak for that. Again, a little bit of sarcasm here. But in whatever anyone is bold, okay, so take whatever anyone else is bold about, that they're bold, I speak foolishly. So this is Paul's full speech. Others may be bold, others may be wise, others may brag, but I'm going to be bold. I'm going to speak as a fool. Paul is taking on his role as a fool here. And look what he says. I'm bold also. They're bold. They do all of these things. Well, I'm going to be foolish and I'm going to be bold. Now, what is he going to be bold about? Are they Hebrews? Now, I think he's speaking of these other people who are, well, they're fools and they've done all of these things. They bring people into bondage. They devour people. They take from you. They exalt themselves. They smack you in the face. All of those people. Well, are they Hebrews? Are they Hebrews? Well, guess what? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they of the seed of Abraham? So am I. He's like, okay, so he's gonna show you what they have in common, right? They're Hebrews, they're Israelites, they're the seed of Abraham. So am I. So these people you put up with who devour you, punch you in the face, do all these things. Well, guess what? I'm just like them at least in those areas. Paul's a Hebrew, he's an Israelite, he's of the seed of Abraham. Are they ministers of Christ? Now look what Paul says. He doesn't say, so am I. Look what he says here. I speak as a fool. That's just crazy. Hey, are they ministers in Christ? Okay. Maybe everyone's answer will be yes. Yes, they are. Okay, well, great. Here it's kind of interesting. Paul doesn't say, okay, I'm going to speak as a minister of Christ. He says, I'm going to speak as a fool. This is the fool's speech, right? They are all of those things. Paul shows what he has in common. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to set all of that aside. I'm going to speak as a fool. And then look what he does. I am more. Oh, and you're like, oh, here goes Paul. Now you think, here's what Paul's going to do. I am more than these guys, right? I was taught by Christ personally for 3 years. I've seen Christ appeared to me. I was chosen. I was separated. I'm an apostle. I have authority. I've been given revelation. God has used me to do signs and wonders. You think he would be like really coming after these guys? Oh, you think you know the truth? Well, I speak the truth because God has given me direct revelation. I'm an apostle. I have authority. I understand scripture. I understand theology. I mean, you think right here, he would just come out swinging, right? Oh, you guys put up with these guys. Well, let me tell you what I am. But he's going to speak as a fool. And look what he does. I am more in labors, more abundant in stripes. Okay, wait. What's going on here, Paul? He doesn't start talking about his knowledge. Doesn't start talking about his accomplishments. He starts talking about, I work and stripes. That whatever these other guys do, whatever they brag about, Paul's just going to I work a lot and stripes. I am beaten for it. I am punished for it. I am persecuted for it. In fact, in stripes above measure. In prisons, more frequently, he is beaten above measure and he's constantly in prison. He goes on to say, in deaths often. So he's constantly suffering, being persecuted, and we'll just say in a sense, facing death frequently. From the Jews, 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. 5 times. He was whipped. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked at night and a day, and have been in the deep, in journeys often, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in the wilderness, in the sea, among false brethren, in weariness and toil and sleeplessness, often in hunger and in thirst, in fastings, often in cold and nakedness. Wow. It's just a laundry list of pain and suffering and trial and difficulty. And some could say failure. He's not talking about mass revivals where so many people got saved. And how many people did you have on Sunday, brother? I had 150 there. Oh, the parking lot was packed. How many? Well, brother, we're going to be thinking about building a new building because God is moving and God is doing this and God is doing that and people are getting saved. All the stories that pastors love to say. No. It's not about a new building project. It's not about a revival. It's not about how many people got saved. It's just a list of pain and suffering. Go through all of that list. Look at all of those things. And labors more abundant, and stripes above measure, and prisons more frequently, and deaths often. From the Jews, 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. 3 times I've beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked at night and a day, and I've been in the deep, and journeys often in perils of water, robbers, his own countrymen, Gentiles, and the city and the wilderness, and the sea, among false brethren, and toil and sleeplessness, hunger, thirst, fasting, cold, nakedness. Beside the other things, what comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches. Who is weak? I am not weak. Who is made to stumble? And I do not burn with, and who is made to stumble? And I do not burn with indignation. It's just a list of what would be perceived as nothing but never-ending difficulty, failure. Because all of those beatings and shipwrecks and hunger and fasting and imprisonments, that's not him being able to have some major impact. That's just him suffering and going from difficulty to difficulty to difficulty. So when Paul steps up, he's like, I'm going to be a fool and I'm going to boast and difficulty and failure and suffering and weakness. Look at verse 30. If I must boast, I will boast in all the things which concern my infirmity. Wow. That's a crazy section of scripture. Now, it continues on, but that's the reading for today. 2 Corinthians 11, basically 18 through 30. It skips 19 and 20, but we read it. 2 Corinthians 11, 18 through 30. Just put that down. The lectionary skips 19 and 20 and then just goes from 21 to 30, but you can just read all of it. Now, when I read it this morning, my first thought was, man, would I boast in those things? Well, in some ways, I could possibly do that, right? I could boast in these things because it makes me look at his commitment, look at his dedication, look at how much he suffered. So I know I could boast about it in a way that tried to make myself look good, right? I don't feel that that's what Paul is doing here, but I know some people we could twist it to try to make it work. We tend to boast about all of our success and all of our victory, not all of this mess. So then I thought, well, this is a list of suffering and difficulty and trial and pain. So then I thought, well, I know what I'm going to do. I should grab my journal and make a list of all the things I should boast in. All of my weaknesses, all of my infirmities, all of my failures, all of my trials, all of my difficulties, all of my sins. So I do challenge you today to do that, right? Now, we're going to talk about it. Well, we'll talk about it now, and I'll mention it at the end. But I do want you right now, at least start thinking about grabbing a notebook. I know some of you never write anything down, but get a notebook and just write down your full speech. And I want you to boast about all of your trials and difficulties and failures and weaknesses and infirmities that you've encountered in your life. This is the full speech. Now, why is this speech theologically significant? All right? Why do we call this section the full speech? Well, I think we need to just note that in this section, Paul is boasting, no question about it, but he's not boasting, this is key, he's not boasting about power. I think we can agree with that. He's not boasting about success. I think we can agree with that. He's definitely not boasting about spiritual triumphs, because there's no spiritual triumph here. There's no revival. There's no church growth. No, nothing like that. I think what he's doing is he's boasting about weaknesses, about suffering, about humiliation, and about infirmity. Those are the things I think he's boasting about. He's not coming about power, success, spiritual triumphs. Oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. This is what the church loves to boast about. We're growing and we're this, and our church is so wonderful and this. And we love to boast about all the spiritual triumphs in our life and how we're overcomer. We love to do all of that. But Paul comes along and he's like, okay, I'm going to boast, but I'm going to boast about being weak. I'm going to boast about suffering. I'm going to boast about being absolutely humiliated. And I'm going to boast about infirmity. Now, immediately, you should be like, wow, this is counterintuitive to almost every human system of religion. This is counterintuitive to every... We want to boast about what makes us look good. We want to boast about that which makes us sound good. Now, again, we could play the game and take all of these stories about all these things that happened to Paul, and we would tell them in a way that would make us look like the hero of the narrative. Oh, come on, you know that, right? Have you ever gone door to door? Has your church ever, like, we're going to meet at the church on Thursdays, and then Thursday evenings, we're going to go door to door, and then everybody comes back to the church? Do you always hear the stories? Oh, this person yelled at me, this person did this, or this person said this, and then I said this back, and they didn't have an answer. And it's almost everyone talks about bragging about what and how they were either persecuted or how they had this argument and they won the debate. It's usually Christian men. Rarely do people come back and go, I was scared, I was nervous, I stumbled upon my words, they asked questions I could not answer, they made me feel stupid, I felt like an idiot because I got all tongue twisted. Rare. Now, the women may be more willing to do that. The men don't like to usually brag about their... It's counterintuitive, and I think women, for the most part, don't like to do that. I can't speak for women, but I think all of us, it's counterintuitive to us to tell everyone about our failures. And this is even more counterintuitive. It's very much a paradox in the context of the Corinthian church, because the Corinthian church seemed to prize rhetoric. They seem to prize their spirit, especially if you see it in 1 Corinthians. I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos. They want their leaders to be powerful, and their leaders are better than the other leaders. They seem to be, they want spiritual signs and wonders, and they want to be able to show off their spiritual gifts, to bring glory to themselves. The Corinthian system prized the ability to speak, strength, power. So Paul coming along going, okay, guys, I'm going to boast. And they're like, okay, he's going to boast about the spiritual gifts he has, prophecy, tongues, whatever healings. And he comes in and is like, broken, beaten, failure, fasting, cold, hunger, infirmity. And they're kind of like, boo, you're trash. We want someone who's charismatic and has got these stories of great victories. Now, this passage brings up some theological questions, right? Now, there's one big one. I don't know if I'll get to this, but we'll see. I think one question that should come to mind when you're reading this is, what is true spiritual authority? Does Paul's credibility as an apostle, does his authority as an apostle, does it come from outward signs of victory, outward signs of power, or does it come from humble humility and suffering for Christ? Now, I think this goes, I think in some ways it flies in the face of modern Christian leadership and models that emphasize charisma, success, influence. Is true Christian leadership rooted in weakness and suffering rather than strength and status? Paul here talks as a fool, and I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't like doing that. Now, I try my best. Look, so many of my decisions I've made not because I'm godly, not because I'm spiritual, but because I'm the absolute opposite of being godly and spiritual. For example, I've told the story a million times. When I first became a pastor, they said, we need to make a sign for the church. And I'm like, great. They said, so after your name, do you want a list of all your degrees? And I'm like, whoa. No. My name will never be on a sign for this church. This is a church. The church is to exalt Christ. Putting my name on it is exalting me. This church, Pastor so-and-so. Associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree. And do I put out how many associates I have, how many bachelors I have, how many masters I have? Do I put that down? And I'm like, no, my name and my educational accomplishments will not appear on a sign. It will not even appear when we have a church website. My name didn't appear anywhere on it. You say, I know people say, that's ridiculous. People need to, because the church was never supposed to be about me. I'm nobody. It was supposed to be, this is a place where we come and open our Bibles and we dig in exegetical study, church history, theology, doctrine, philosophy. We dig in, we struggle, we search for truth. It's not about a person. If it's about a person, it's not the person, a human person. Well, okay, let me take it back. It's not about a human person standing in front of you. It's about the true God, true man, the eternal Son of God. That's the only person that matters. It's about his word. So it cannot be about me. It cannot be. When I was on Christian radio, my program, I never introduced myself. I simply, in my introduction, introduced that this is a ministry of Victory Baptist Church located in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Today, we're going to be discussing this. Or we're going to be going to the sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church and play part of a sermon. I left my name out of it then. It was only later on when Sermon Audio was like, hey, now, for you to be able to, I can't remember, it was to live broadcaster to do something. Well, we need a picture of you and we need your name. And I'm like, I don't want a picture and I don't want a name. But I had no choice at that time. I can't remember what the reason was, but it was ridiculous. I have fought that every way forever, not because I'm godly. People need to understand that. Not because I'm godly, but because I would begin to find boasting in, yes, I took this little small church in the middle of nowhere, Texas. That was literally when I walked in, wires were hanging from the ceiling. There was broken down building, a couple of folded metal chairs. It was nothing. It was literally nothing. And before it was over, a complete remodeled building, a completely added wing, and we had that place packed out. There was no more. We were thinking about buying property for more parking. I could sit there and say, look. Now, ultimately, though, it all fell apart. Okay, so it doesn't matter. I should have gotten out of town right then is when I should have gotten out of town. As soon as the church built there, I had a resume that I took it from nothing to that. Now I could have walked away being the victorious one. But I didn't. I stayed and it all fell apart. And I blame myself for it falling apart. I don't blame anybody else. It's all me. I messed everything up. Because the way I continue to try to do church that goes against everything you're supposed to do. But either way, it all blew up and it all fell. But I had a point where I could have taken great pride in that. Great pride. And if someone would have asked me, oh, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. Oh, we packing the place out. We don't even have, I would have just started talking about all the success. I know I would have. And I probably did. I probably bragged about the success. Look, I don't give my name, but you hear me sometimes brag about this podcast is in the top 5% of all podcasts in the world. That's me boasting about the wrong thing. I should not do that. I should not boast about numbers. Because sometimes you can feel like a failure. Sometimes it's humiliating to look at your numbers and go, wait, we only had that many downloads? Oh man, what am I doing? I'm an idiot. It can be discouraging when you go live and you look at the numbers and you're like 5, 10, 15, and you'll look at someone else broadcasting 300 and you're like, I'm an idiot. See that I'm boasting all about the wrong thing. See, we find spiritual authority, spiritual success is measured in the same worldly ways in which the church measures spiritual authority of a pastor based on those same measurements. Even though we say we don't. A pastor who's got thousands look way different than the pastor who has 5 people and a broken down building in the middle of nowhere. The podcast that reaches that certain level, all of a sudden they're the influential one. They're the ones who can write the devotional. They're the ones who can go on tour. They're the ones who can put content behind a paywall. They're now seen as the leaders of a specific element of Christianity. Others are, and Christians say, well, we don't look to the outward worldly success. Give me a stinking break. Yes, we do. So what is true spiritual authority? It should not be seen in all of these external elements of success. It should be seen in broken, humble, suffering, and serving. What does it mean to boast in weakness? Paul repeatedly undercuts all worldly notions of boasting. In this section, in this full speech, he undercuts all worldly notions of boasting. He mocks the idea that spiritual superiority is proven by strength. He's mocking the idea that spiritual superiority is seen in strength and doing all of these great things. No, he's literally throwing that out. What kind of gospel makes suffering and makes weakness a reason for boasting? Because that's a gospel that's very different than what we see all around us. How should suffering be interpreted theologically? See, many churches teach that victory, healing, or prosperity are signs of spiritual maturity, favor, and blessings from God. Paul seems to be presenting a radically different framework. He's constantly beaten. He's constantly shipwrecked. He's hungry. He's cold. He's weak. Yet, he's the apostle to the Gentiles. Goes against all the notions we have. See, we see God is moving when there's victory, when there's success, when there's a building, when there's crowds. God is doing something. When there's nothing, it's broke. Oh, that place is dead. God has abandoned that place. God is not moving. It's just stupid. It's just foolish. People have said that about things that I have. It's over. It's done. It's dead. It's ridiculous. Oh, but look at our church. We're growing and there's excitement. God is moving. God is always moving when there's a crowd, and God is not there when there's not a crowd. But then we say we don't look at things from a worldly perspective. That's exactly what the world does. The church looks at things the exact same way the world does while claiming not to be looking at things the way the world does. You're just lying to yourselves. And Paul blows all of this out of the water. Is there a theology of weakness in the gospel? Because this section of Paul's full speech, does it not set up the famous verse in 2 Corinthians? My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Does weakness, does infirmity, does failure, dare I say, does sin reveal the gospel more clearly than strength, success, and obedience ever could? Oh, I'm messing up everyone's understanding. Paul, in his full speech, is deconstructing false views of ministry, false views of spiritual strength, false views of what divine favor looks like. He seems to be exalting a theology of the cross, where God's power is shown most clearly in the weakness of the suffering servant. Paul is exalting a theology of the cross where God's power is shown most clearly in the weakness of the suffering servant. It's shown most clearly in the suffering and the failure and the stumbling and the difficulty. Not in the success, not in what you consider triumph and victory. Victory is found in the suffering. Paul's speech is turning it all upside down. We come and we're supposed to say, this is what, think about even how we are taught to do testimonies, right? We're taught to do testimonies this way. This was my life. Here's all the bad things I did. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Aren't you very proud of all the horrible things I've done? How messed up my life was. But boom, I came to Jesus and now look at me. Look at me now. I don't drink. I don't dance. I don't smoke. I don't go to movies. I don't watch Netflix. I don't have HBO Max. I don't do anything. I'm godly. Look at me. My marriage is perfect. My life is perfect. I'm so great. Look at me. Now we say, no. We're pointing to Jesus. Whatever. You can try to say you're pointing to Jesus, but it all becomes about how you are so great now. And then you don't tell everyone how you're still a failure and still a sinner and you still struggle and you still have unforgiveness and you still have bitterness and you still lust and you still gossip and you still slander and you still don't love God the way you're supposed to and you don't love others the way you're supposed to and you love yourself a whole lot more and you're really glad now that Christianity gives you a situation where everyone can look to you. The full speech, we've looked at just a section of it, but here's what you need to know about the full speech. The full speech is Paul's ironic and deeply sarcastic defense of his apostleship. It goes from 2 Corinthians 11:16 to chapter 12, verse 10. The full speech goes from 2 Corinthians 11:16 to chapter 12, verse 10. I want you to become intimately acquainted with the full speech. Some would refer to this speech as one of the most, from a rhetorical standpoint, complex. It's very emotionally raw. And it's very theologically rich, maybe some of the most in the New Testament. In the full speech, Paul, as I've tried to articulate to you, has adopted the voice of a fool, someone who's going to boast, because the Corinthians have been deceived by the so-called super apostles who boast in their power, who boast in their success, who boast in their worldly credentials. But Paul's going to meet them on their own terms. And he's going to do so to completely undermine the entire idea of boasting, because Paul's going to boast in the very things that the world would consider shameful, that the world would consider a failure. Who boasts that my church has no one? Nothing is going on in our church. It's a broken down building. We don't have money. We don't have resources. We haven't had anyone show up in a very long time. And I stumble and I fail and I don't say things correctly. And my sermon was trash. No. It's all glamour and glitz and marketing and programs. And we got to do this and we got to do this. If you want to see how the speech kind of works out, it's introduced really. The introduction of the speech really happens in 2 Corinthians 11, starting in verse, say, 16. Look what Paul does here. If you go back to 12 through, if you want to see kind of what leads to it, look what he does here in 2 Corinthians 11, 12. But what I do, I will also continue to do, that I may cut off the opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be regarded, just as we are in the things of which they boast. So he's dealing with some people and they're boasting. And look what he says. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if the ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. So he's warning the church at Corinth, hey, these are the super apostles. They are false. They're false teachers, but they transform themselves like Satan does, transforming himself into an angel of light. They transform themselves into the ministers of Christ. They talk a big game. They boast. They brag. They talk about their success, their spiritual victories, and Paul is pointing them out. And then how does he counter them? He doesn't come by then. You think he would show up now and then talk about, well, his power and his authority. But no, what does he do? Look at verse 16. I say again, let no one think me a fool, if otherwise at least receive me as a fool, that I also may boast a little. So receive me as a fool, and I'm going to boast. What I speak not according to the Lord, but as it were foolishly, and the confidence of boasting. So he's really being sarcastic. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to speak as a fool. I'm going to just speak as a fool, and I'm going to boast. I'm going to act like a fool, and I'm just going to boast. I'm going to brag. Seeing that many boast according to the flesh, I also will boast. And then now this goes right after the Corinthians. You guys put up with fools gladly. Who do they pull up with? Who are they putting up with? These false apostles. And you put up with these false apostles because you're so wise. He's being very sarcastic. You think you're so wise, for you put up with it. And these people that they're putting up with, they bring them into bondage. They devour them. They take from you. They exalt themselves. They strike you in the face. To our shame, I say that we speak too weak for that. We're too weak to put up with all of that. But in whatever anyone is bold, I speak foolishly. I am bold also. And then Paul begins his bragging. And all of his bragging is about failure. All right? So if we want to go through this, the introduction to the speech is 2 Corinthians 11, 16 through 21, if you want to kind of break this down. All right. 2 Corinthians 11, 16 through 21 is the introduction. Paul asked the Corinthians to bear with him in a little foolishness, basically. Hey, listen to me, and listen to me as I'm a fool. He mocks their tolerance of being enslaved, exploited, and humiliated by false teachers. And then he ironically states, I'm speaking as a fool. So put up with I'm going to act like a fool here. Then, so there's the introduction. That goes 2 Corinthians 11, 16 through 21. Then 2 Corinthians 11, 22 through part of 23, we'll call this Paul's earthly credentials. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Paul acknowledges that he has the same qualifications, Jewish heritage, covenantal identity, but he's kind of minimizing their importance. What he's saying is earthly credentials, even spiritual ones, are not the true basis for apostolic authority. Oh, you've got some earthly credentials. They're Hebrews. They're Israelites. They've got this. They've got that. That's not where spiritual authority comes from. Now, this fits into the apostolic understanding of the text because this is about Paul having apostolic authority versus these false apostles, which have no apostolic authority. But the apostolic authority is not determined by earthly credentials. Then the third part of the outline would be 2 Corinthians 11, 23, the second part of verse 23, down to verse 29. Paul begins to boast in suffering and weakness. Paul begins a detailed catalog of his sufferings, imprisonments, beatings, near-death experience, 5 times lashed, 3 times beaten with rods, once stoned, shipwrecked 3 times, danger from rivers, robbers, Jews, Gentiles, cities, wilderness, hunger, thirst, cold, nakedness, daily anxiety for the churches. That's how I wrote them all down. Paul, his detailed list of suffering, imprisonment, beating, near-death experiences, 5 times lashed, 3 times beaten with rods, once stoned, shipwrecked 3 times, danger from rivers, robbers, Jews, Gentiles, cities, wilderness, hunger, thirst, cold, and nakedness, and daily anxiety for all the churches. And then verse 30, if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. If I'm going to boast, I'm going to boast in all the things that shows my weakness. Who boast about the things that show that you are weak? Hey guys, I'm going to boast that I'm weak in this area, and I'm a failure in this area, and I do this wrong, and I've had this problem, and I've had this difficulty. Now, of course, now just make sure we're honest. We can find a way to even do that in such a way that still makes it about us. But the point is, he's contradicting that spiritual success, spiritual rightness is not determined by the beautiful buildings I know people love to pick churches that look good and look like they're successful. Well, and people will say that, well, God is doing something here. Or is it just all external show? See, Paul completely flips the idea of boasting not to highlight success. He is glorying in weakness. He is glorying in hardship. I'll state it that way. So what is the outline of the full speech? I mean, I've tried to break this down a number of different ways for you, but we have the introduction to the full speech, 2 Corinthians 11, 16 through 21. We have Paul's earthly credentials, 2 Corinthians 11, 22 through, say, 23a, if you want to break 23 down into 2 parts. And then we have the boasting and suffering. Boasting, I'll call it boasting and suffering and weakness, 2 Corinthians 11, 23b, all the way down to verse 29. Then we'll call this the Damascus escape, 2 Corinthians 11, 30 through 33. Paul ends the section with the story of his humiliating escape from Damascus. He's lowered in a basket. Now, I know a lot of times it's preached like it's dramatic and it's exciting and powerful, but I think it kind of functions as a anticlimax. Well, that's see, it's not a triumphant escape. It's kind of weak and humiliating. Paul, get in this basket and we'll lower you down. It's not triumphant. It's not the parting of the Red Sea. It's not, I'm going to walk through this crowd and say, you can't touch me because I'm an apostle of Jesus Christ and he will not let you touch me until it's time. He's in a basket being lowered down like he's a scared little kid. His apostolic ministry is now here not marked by dramatic victories, by humble vulnerability. That's 2 Corinthians 11, 30 through 33. So that gets us all the way through 2 Corinthians 11. Now we come to the next part of the outline, which is Paul's vision and the thorn, 2 Corinthians 12, 1 through 10. And you know that story very well. He's lowered down in the basket at the end of chapter 11, chapter 12, and then it is doubtless not profitable for me to boast. Now, he just boasted about all these weaknesses, but now he's like, hey, no. It's not good for me to boast because he's not going to boast about something. Look what happens here. This is Paul's vision and the thorn, 2 Corinthians 12, 1 through 2, or 1 through 10, I should say. All right. And now Paul talks about visions and revelations in 12, 1 through 6, right? Paul recounts being caught up to the third heaven of paradise 14 years prior. He speaks in the third person because he's distancing himself from pride. He refuses to boast in these experiences. He just boasted in all of this failure and infirmity and weakness. He just boasted about having to escape in a basket like a little kid. But now look what he does. It is doubtless not profitable for me to boast. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. I knew a man in Christ who 14 years ago, whether in the body, I do not know, or whether out of the body, I do not know, God knows. Such a one was caught up to the third heaven, and I know such a man, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows. How he was caught up into the paradise and heard inexpressible words, which is not lawful for a man to utter. Of such a one I will boast, yet of myself I will not boast, except in my infirmities. For though I might desire to boast, I will not be a fool, for I will speak the truth, but I refrain, lest anyone should think of me above what he sees me to be or hears from me. He's not going to boast in this experience. He speaks of himself in the third person, as if he's separate from it. He's not going to use it. He's not going to use a spiritual experience. Give me a break. Do you listen to Christian podcasts? Do you listen to pastors? They love to boast about their spiritual experiences. I was so broken and I was so distraught. And then I heard God say to me, get up, rise up, do this. And we love all of these stories. Instead of boasting in those experiences, what did Paul say? I will not boast except of my weakness. The only thing Paul is going to boast about is his weakness. Even extraordinary spiritual experiences are not to be boasted about. They do not define true faithfulness. They do not define true ministry. Just because someone had 1 million spiritual experiences, it doesn't mean anything. You're boasting about the wrong thing because you're boasting about yourself. So the next part of our outline here is Paul's vision and the thorn, 2 Corinthians 12, 1 through 2. You can break this down into visions and revelations in chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. And then verses 12, 7 through 9, Paul talks about the thorn in the flesh. Paul says he was given a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to keep him from being conceited. He pleaded 3 times for it to be removed, but God said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Then, in this section, again, Paul's vision and thorn, 2 Corinthians 12, 1 through 10. I'm breaking it into 3 parts. Visions and revelations, 12, 1 through 6. Thorn in the flesh, 12, 7 through 9. And then Paul's conclusion, 12, 10. For when I am weak, I am strong. Paul then ultimately embraces weakness. He embraces insults. He embraces hardships. He embraces persecution. He embraces calamity. Not because they're good in themselves, because guess what? It is weakness. It is failure. It is pain. It is suffering that ultimately displays Christ's power far better than everything else. I know we think what just shows power is all of the triumph and all the victory, but I'm going to say it doesn't. Because Christ's power, how is Christ glorified? He is glorified by not making us better. He's glorified by saving and imputing to us perfection while we are broken failures. And when people see our brokenness and our failures, I know they're going to say hypocrites, but what they should say is they are trophies of grace. They're definitely not trophies of an infused righteousness because they're all unrighteous, broken, messed up people, but God saved them out of an eternal love and a sovereign grace given to those who don't deserve it, to those who are weak and broken and failures. And the church doesn't like that message. We want the message God saved us, and look at how perfect we are. That's not a trophy of grace. That becomes a trophy of supposed transformation. But I'm transformed in my position. I am still very much the broken sinner in practice, and I'm weak, and I fail, and I stumble. So what is the takeaway from the full speech? I just broke down the whole thing for you as quickly as I could. Well, true spiritual authority is marked by weakness, not dominance. Spiritual authority is marked by weakness, not dominance. Paul dismantles the idea that charisma, that status, that influence equates spiritual power. The church always equates spiritual power, and they give that power to the pastors and the speakers who have charisma, who has status. That's who gets it. Look at that church. It's the MacArthur. It's the R.C. Sproul. It's the Piper. It's the Albert Mull. You just name the names. Those are the ones who get it, who have the charisma, the power, the influence. The little broken church down nowhere is seen as a complete abysmal failure. And many people would just say, they should just shut that thing down, burn it down. That church hasn't done anything from God. It's dead. It's foolish. It's stupid. I'm not going to go to a church that looks like that. Because we look at success and authority the exact same way the world does. And you know what? How we prove that? We will drive by 10 churches where the doors are open and the pastor is there preaching to go to the big arena or the big mega church, and we drop down $50, we drop down $100 so that we can get in to see the real spiritual authority, the man who is really speaking for God, and we give him $100 and we buy his study Bible and we buy his commentary and we exalt him because we see success the same way the world does. They drive past all kinds of little music venues where some nobody is playing music, and they will drive to the arena for the next big pop star. Just like you drive past all the little broken down pastors who are losers, and you go give money to your little Christian pop star. It's the same garbage. And the church tries to pretend, oh, we don't see things the way the world sees it. It's no different. The world has their celebrities. We have their celebrities. They have their industrial complex to move merch and sell things. The Christian world has its own industrial complex to sell merch and move product. You just got to have the latest Christian celebrity to push that study Bible, to push that book. Spiritual authority is marked by weakness, not dominance. Weakness is the stage for God's power. Paul does not deny weakness. He embraces it as the platform where grace is most visible. God's grace, God's power is seen in me, not because I've ever been victorious or ever been successful. God's grace is shown in me because I'm a no good, stinking sinner who has failed far more than anybody who listened to this podcast will ever even begin to grasp or understand. Boasting is always dangerous and deceptive, even when it's true. Paul shows how easily boasting becomes self-exaltation. Even spiritual experiences like supposed visions are not grounds for pride. And it seems that the Christian life includes suffering. That's a fact. And it's not a punishment, but it seems that somehow it leads us to participate in Christ. Paul's suffering is not a sign of God's abandonment, but of his conformity to Christ. We conform. He suffered, we conform to his suffering by suffering. The cross is the pattern. It's not the exception. The way of Jesus is weakness, loss, humiliation, then exaltation. Paul walks the same path. So that means our life is going to be one of weakness. It's going to be one of loss. It's going to be one of humiliation. It's going to be one of failure. It's going to be one of sin. Then we get to exaltation and our glorification. We want the glorification now. God's grace, it's not just sufficient. It is revealed through our insufficiency. God's grace is not just sufficient. It is revealed through your insufficiency. The thorn is not removed. The grace is not the removal of hardship, but it is faithfulness through hardship. The full speech is an open rebuke to modern Christian triumphalism. Hey, everything is about victory and being triumphant. It's a rebuke of that. This speech forces you and me to ask, are you measuring and am I measuring spiritual leadership by weakness and humility, or am I measuring it by charisma and success? Am I trying to erase weakness, or am I going to glory in it? Am I building a theology of the cross, or am I building a theology of power and comfort? That is the full speech on this Friday. Now, what do you need to do? I want you to go write your own full speech. I want you to be a fool, and I want you to boast in all of your weaknesses, all of your infirmities, all of your trials, and all of your suffering. I want you to boast about it, and I want you to embrace your brokenness. I want you to embrace your weakness. I want you to embrace your infirmity. I want you to embrace your failure. And I want you to allow God to be glorified in it and understand that Christianity is about saving you in your weakness, not by taking away your weakness, but by giving you perfect, beautiful righteousness imputed to your account, even though you're broken and weak and you don't deserve anything. It's not about transforming you from your weakness. It's about saving you in it. This podcast is hosted by a broken sinner. I stumble. I fail. I mess up. I don't speak correctly. I mess up in my pronunciations. I mess up in my introductions. I mess up in my conclusions. I stumble. I fail. I have a seizure disorder and neurological issues that cause, and sometimes I use it as a crutch to excuse my failures and my mess ups instead of just saying, you know what? I'm just an idiot and I don't always speak correctly. And even if it's caused by the seizures, I make sure I tell people that because I'm trying not to make myself look stupid, because I'm insecure. I have ego, I have pride. I want to be seen as being successful. I want to be seen as being smart. I want to be seen as, look at what he's doing with that pot. I want all of that. And you know what that all means is I've never learned the lesson of the full speech. It can't be about me. We constantly make everything about us. I've handed you the full speech. I've given you an entire outline of the full speech. I've told you to write your own. I hope somehow something in this will benefit some of us, maybe all of us. God bless.